Hey guys, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a video filled with some patriotic Americana style decor ideas that I put together, and I hope you guys enjoyed the ideas I came up with. The first DIY, I'm using one of these. It's called a bunting, and I got this on clearance a few years back at Walmart, and I never quite knew what to do with it. So today is the day that I'm going to go ahead and upcycle this and use it for some projects. So it does come on this ring right here, and I just had to remove it as much as of the fabric that I needed. And since this is all folded like accordion style and whatnot, I did have to give this a good pressing with an iron, and you will see that here shortly. So since I didn't have the correct colors in the burlap fabric for this DIY, I figured why not upcycle this and make it into something different or use it in my projects. It's certainly fitting for all the patriotic decor ideas. And I like that there's already striping at the bottom, and that's just perfect, especially since I had intended on creating like a sign using some burlap canvas signs or panels or whatever you want to call them. So like I mentioned, I did give this a good ironing because it was super creased and folded, and I just ironed enough of the material that I needed to use for this project. And this took no time at all. It was very easy, and I thought I was going to have a more difficult time with flattening this out, but it flattened out pretty quickly. So once I had the material completely straight and flat, this is the burlap canvas panels that I was speaking of. I've had this in my stash for many years as well. This was from Michael's. This originally came from that on clearance. I can't even recall how long I've had these. And again, I've just never gotten around to using them. So I came up with the idea of why not create a flag. Just by using this material that's on this existing bunting, I decided I'm going to cut out some square pieces to resemble a flag by using these burlap canvases. I used this chalk writer marker that I had on hand. It was perfect for creating my trace marks. And you can do this as well if you with marker or something different if you wanted to trace it on the opposite side, like the wrong side of the fabric, just so you don't have like the trace marks. Then I cut out each piece that I went ahead and traced just to fit the size of each of the canvas panels or canvas burlap canvas. So I just used the initial cutout that I made as my template for sizing the remaining pieces to fit this perfectly. And this doesn't really have to be precise or anything because you will see here shortly that I will create like a frayed edge. And here I have all my pieces cut out. I'm just going to give it a dry fit and kind of assemble things how I want them to look. And the next thing I did was start to fray the edges of each piece. All you do is just pick at the little stitching in the corner and just pull it. It was super easy to do. You can pull on the string as much or as little as you want, depending on how frayed you want your piece to look. And you can always trim off all of the strings just to even it out, because you will see that when you fray your edges just by pulling at the strings, that it will sometimes create like uneven or ununiform lines. So you definitely have to snip the edges with your scissors just to make everything look more even. So I just did this with all of them. I like the rusticness of this and how it just goes with the whole look and the whole vibe, and as opposed to just keeping it like the straight edge. Super easy to do, and I think it adds a lot more character. And once I completed that step, again, I just went ahead and trimmed off all the frayed parts, just making sure that one side wasn't more frayed than the other and just evening things out. The next thing to do was to attach all these pieces onto the burlap canvas. All I did was used some hot glue. And this works out really well because it does stick, the fabric on fabric does adhere well. And you just have to be careful because this is like a burlap material. So when pushing on to the fabric, the hot glue might seep through the little holes, so just be careful. And once this part was done, I wanted to add some stars. Now, I didn't have like any like white colored stars or any small stars, so I decided, I'm going to utilize these star shapes that I have on hand. It's by Crafter Square, and they're like the laser cut design. They have different design cutouts on each of them, and I just picked like the ones that I wanted to use in this project. And initially I was going to use like 6 stars, and I did play around with the placement and the different ways I can arrange the stars. But after going back and forth and messing with the placement and whatnot, I didn't really like the look of the 6 stars. So ultimately, I decided to go with a odd number 5. But before doing that, I went ahead and painted each of these stars, just sort of a dry brush technique. I didn't want these to be fully covered in the white paint. I did want some of that brown to show through. Just again, this is more of a rugged, rustic, distressed piece. So I did want some of the brown to show through, just because I didn't want everything to look new or bright. And after I dry brush over each of the star with the white chalk paint, I decided that, I'm going to add more to this to give it more of that rustic and distressed look. So I experimented by using this Distress Oxide by Tim Holtz, I believe, and this is from Joann's. I just sprayed it on. It's the vintage photo color, and I'm just basically layering on different things just to create that look I was trying to achieve. The second Distress ink was the color Walnut, also by Tim Holtz. So after I had layered on several of those different finishes, I felt like this was missing something. I like the look of like that, sort of like that rusty look. So I decided I'm gonna add a little bit of that rusty faux rust on here by using some cinnamon. All I did was use a foam brush and added some Mod Podge to the stars, and this is going to act as my adhesive. And then I just sprinkled on the cinnamon powder as much as I wanted in different areas, just to create that faux rust look. And this really turned out the way I had envisioned it. So it definitely fit the look that I was going for with this flag decor sign. And I'm glad that I went ahead and opted to do this. But if you don't like the rust look or anything that's too rustic or distressed, you can bypass this step right here. You can even just paint your stars a solid white color if you choose. But I really do favor this sort of rustic look, especially with the Patriotic Americana style decor. I just think it looks really nice, and it goes well together. So after I had my cinnamon added onto each of the stars, this is where I was sort of messing around constantly with the placement. And this is all the different styles and of the laser that was inside each star. So I ultimately just decided I'm gonna go with 5 stars, and then I just used some hot glue to glue that on. But before I moved on to gluing everything, I decided, I'm going to add more of the cinnamon while my foam brush was still wet with Mod Podge, and just dab it on the sides of the burlap panel or canvas panel. And I like that look, and I kept on with it because it just ties everything together. It would be odd just to have like the rusty stars and then everything else look super clean and, plain. So I wanted to just bring more of that rusticness to the outer parts of this burlap canvas and all around each of the flag shapes, just to tie everything together. And I really like that look. I think that it definitely makes everything more cohesive. When all of this came together, I really love the outcome. They just make a cute little shelf sitter decor. I can also hang this on a wall if I wanted to, but just to stack them on top of each other to create like that flag look, I think is adorable, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Moving right along to DIY number 2. I am taking a thrifted basket. This is like one of those wall basket decor. I've had this in my stash for quite some time. I've used it in several holiday vignettes and just my everyday decor, just filling it with different seasonal stems and whatnot. But I wanted to use this for my patriotic decor. So I decided I'm going to remove that sort of like basket material that was all woven around this basket. I'm not sure exactly what that material is, but I just went ahead and cut into it and started unraveling all of that trim. I really didn't care for it too much, and I felt like I can totally make this look different just removing that. So it was really easy to get into all of those strings and weaving and whatnot. It just took some time. But once everything was cleaned up, it was time to create my little wall hanging patriotic style decor. I'm using some burlap fabric, the rolled fabrics from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and use that bunting that I used for my first DIY. I'm going to use that navy blue section because I didn't have any navy blue burlap on hand. So this is where reusing and repurposing items that I have on hand is very useful. If I'm not going to use it for its intended purpose, I might as well use it for projects. So this came in really handy, just having this navy blue fabric. Since I was using like only one section of it at a time, I did have to cut 2 strips just to make it long enough to wrap around the entire basket. Now, as you can see here, I did cut 2 strips, but I sort of eyeballed it, not really knowing the width that I needed to use as my weave, if you will. So I did have to keep cutting into it and making it more narrow just so that I had the right width to fit into those areas where I had cut that ropey material. And I'm essentially going to be creating a replacement to what used to be there, just with the red, the off-white, and the blue fabric. And it's going to, like I said, it's going to be a patriotic decor. And I thought this was a super fun way to incorporate like the woven pattern using the burlap material. And so I did the same thing with both the off-white or cream colored burlap as well as the red, just cutting strips to the right width and length that I will be using to weave through the basket, basically replacing where the original ropey material was. So here I'm just showing how I sort of frayed the edges. I did the same thing as I did with the first DIY. I just peeled one corner off of the string and then just kept pulling it across until I had the right amount of fraying that I wanted for each of those strips. And then I just trimmed off any uneven parts. And then here I thought I was recording, but I didn't. So I took some Waverly's antique wax and just diluted it with some water and just did sort of like a staining or a wash over this entire piece, and just using like a wet wipe just to sort of wipe back the excess antique wax. Once everything was dry, it was time to weave the burlap fabric into those open basket weave where the old roping was attached. So it was really easy to do because the gaps in between each weave or reed or whatever you want to call it was pretty spacious. So it was really easy to just sort of weave it in and out with the help of a pair of scissors. And here I'm going to take my second strip of that blue burlap and just overlap it with where the first one ended, and then just continue to weave that in and out until everything was fully covered. Again, this is such a super easy process, and I basically just repeated the same steps with both the red burlap and the cream colored burlap. Okay, now that the fabric strips have been woven into the basket, I'm taking this flag that I had in my stash. This is a fabric flag, and all I did was remove it from the handle that it came on, or the flag holder. And I did want this to tie in with all of the vintage look of this basket. So I decided that I was going to distress it and make it look more vintage. And I'm going to do that with the help of some Decrepit Dust by DIY Paint. So for this wall hanging basket, I'm going to use these white lilacs that came from Dollar Tree. I thought that it looked really pretty inside this basket. And I will be adding some additional greenery around it because I felt like it wasn't full enough. So I also picked up this, I believe it's eucalyptus, also from the Dollar Tree, my recent Dollar Tree trip. And I just went ahead and stuffed that into the basket just to make things look more fuller. So the last thing I added was that flag, and as I mentioned, I'm just going to be removing it from the hanger, the little pole, and I'm going to use some Decrepit Dust. And all I did was took a dry brush, just dipped it into the loose powder, and then brushed it all over this flag, just adding some grunginess to it and making it look old and giving it that faux vintage look. And I did this until I was completely happy with the overall look. And then I went ahead and hot glued this onto that basket right in the center. And that was pretty much it for this DIY. I hope you guys like this flip of this basket, this repurposed basket. I think it came out adorable, perfect for my 4th of July vignette. And now we're on to DIY number 3. I'm going to upcycle these thrifted items. I found an old wood cutting board as well as a rusty pail. And I'm going to use the same bunting from my previous projects and cut strips from it. Before painting this, I'm going to go ahead and give it a good wipe down. I also cut out some decals from my Cricut. I cut out the words USA as well as some stars. Now my original idea was to create the Cricut vinyl cutout as a stencil, but that didn't quite work out. So I will be doing a reverse stencil instead, which you will be seeing here shortly. So this is the vinyl, the piece of the vinyl that was supposed to be intended as the stencil, but since it was all messed up, I'm just going to go ahead and use the stars as a reverse stencil. You will see that here shortly. Before I do any of those steps, I'm going to go ahead and use some antique Waverly wax and brush that on and wipe it back with a wet wipe. I'm going to do this just to create a darker finish on this wood, acting as a stain. And once that Waverly wax was dry, I'm going to go ahead and create some distressing using a dry brush technique. Before moving on to that step, I did make sure that I had all parts of this wood fully covered and completely dried. It's important to have each coat of paint dry before moving on to the next step so that your colors don't get all muddled. So I did this with the help of my heat tool once again. And then I went ahead and used some white chalk paint by Waverly. And I'm going to use a chip brush from the Dollar Tree and just slightly dab that into the paint, and then just use a soft light touch and gently brush that against the wood, just creating more of a dry brush effect as opposed to full coverage. And this is just to create that distressed finish. And there's so many ways of creating a distressed wood look, but this is just one easy way of doing it, and I felt like it was the quickest way to achieve that look. I also used some decrepit dust after the paint was dry, just to add some darkness to different parts of this painted finish and further enhancing the old aged look, or the faux look of aged wood. And here is the decrepit dust being added on. As you can see, it's turning dark in some areas. It's like a loose powder form that instantly makes your wood look like it's been around for a while. I took the strips of burlap that I cut from the bunting from the previous projects and just hot glued that around the top part of this wood. I started with the navy blue color and then proceeded to hot glue the second strip of burlap in that natural color. And again, this is just to further embellish this piece to make it look more patriotic. So now is the part where I am showing you that there's that little opening right there where you can actually screw this onto the piece of wood. But before moving on to that step, I am going to do my reverse stencil technique. I took the decals that I cut. These are the stars. I chose 5 stars and just burnished that on. I will be painting over these decals. So right now it's just going to be the application of these vinyls. And while you can opt to keep a vinyl decal on this project and you'd be fine, I think using a different colored vinyl decal would be better suited for this project, and not white, because I think white just looks too bright and too new. So I'm going to go ahead and burnish the USA wording across this pail as well. And again, once I have everything applied to this bucket, it was time to paint over the entire thing. I'm just mostly focusing on the front side. I didn't bother with the back or anything like that. And I painted it in the crimson color by Waverly. I went ahead and sped up the drying process, and ignore that little portion there that I didn't paint. I will eventually paint over that. I took a skewer and just started removing the decals, and this will reveal the under color, the base color, which is that rusty brown color. And then I just went ahead and just completely removed all the decals just to expose the design. And I really like how this looks so far, but I wanted to add a little bit more layer to this. And you will see that after removing all of the decals, I'm gonna go ahead and dry brush some white chalk paint over the entire thing. So far, this is how it's looking after doing the reverse stencil. Next thing I wanted to do was, of course, to add some distressing, make it more rustic, my favorite thing to do. I took my sanding sponge and just gently sanded off some paint from different parts of this bucket, and focusing on different areas like over the wording, over the image, you know, the stars and everything, and the corners. Now, as I was doing this and I was scuffing up like the rim of the pail, I noticed that the rusty paint color was coming off and it was exposing that silver, like the galvanized metal look, which I was not crazy about because that is not the look that I'm going for. So I just fixed that situation by applying some red paint over those exposed areas where like the metal was coming through. So that's sort of the issue when you're dealing with a painted surface such as this. When you do sand off like the paint that you painted, chances are you're gonna expose whatever the base layer or the base color of your piece is. And in this case, it's looking like it's a silver metal. So I didn't want that exposed because it just didn't go with the look of this. So I just painted over those areas with that same crimson color. And that about fixed it. And I'm just gonna go ahead and touch up any areas that needed more red paint. And after doing this and drying everything, I went ahead and added yet another layer of paint, this time using some white chalk paint. And I will be using the dry brush technique once again, just to create some distressing. I almost forgot this step. I did add some of that decrepit dust to the corners, to the edges, just for a little bit more darkness and depth to this piece. Next thing I did was dry brush that white chalk paint using my chip brush over the entire piece. In areas that I felt like I covered it too much, I went ahead and just wiped it with a damp paper towel and then brushed over those areas with the crimson red chalk paint. And I just went back and forth with the red and the white, depending on if I got too much white chalk paint, I would just dab some red paint over it, and so on and so forth until I got the look I was trying to achieve. And the final step in the painting part of this was to add some big top to the bucket just to protect the finish, and it does add a nice sheen to this. And this pretty much wraps up the painting portion. The only thing now left to do is to attach the bucket to that piece of wood. Now, as you can see, I'm marking off that little hole in the back of the pail where you can screw or drill in a screw. I didn't opt to do that. I was trying to go the easy route just by hammering in a piece like a nail, but that wasn't really sufficient and it wasn't really gonna do the job. So instead, I decided I was going to add 2 nails to either side where the handle of that bucket is, and then just use a piece of jute twine just to make a knot around the nail. And that was pretty much it. It worked in my favor. So moving on to DIY number 4, this one's going to be a super easy and quick one. I just got this idea, a quick idea, just to add to my vignette. I had these styrofoam balls on hand, and I also had this 2 packs of rope from the Dollar Tree, which I picked up sometime last year. This is by the Shore Living brand, and it's just like the nautical style that they come out with. I think they might have them out this year again. So all I did was to create a starting point. I just dabbed some hot glue to the center of that ball and just pushed that rope down into place, and then just continued twirling it around in a circular fashion until the entire styrofoam ball was completely covered. Now, essentially, I was just trying to create some bowl fillers because I was creating a cute little display for my 4th of July patriotic decor look, and I thought that I needed something that was patriotic looking to put into this bowl, which you will see in the final reveal. And I thought that this rope came in handy because while it is meant to be nautical, I thought that the colors were perfect for a patriotic decor look. So I just continued wrapping the styrofoam ball and adding hot glue into place just to secure everything. And as you can see, that rope was barely enough to cover this styrofoam ball. I didn't want to go into the second pack of rope because I had intended on making 2 of these bowl fillers. So instead, I used some regular nautical rope and just thinned it out by removing the strips because they do have like 3 pieces of rope intertwined, and I just took one of the pieces from it and just twirled it around the center to fill the gaps and hot glued that down into place, and voila, it did the trick. I went ahead and repeated the same steps for the second ball, and it was the same process, and in an instant I was able to create 2 bowl fillers, just enough to stick into my display. And you can do this with any colored rope or any ball of yarn, any colored yarn that you might have on hand. But I thought this was a good way to use up those nautical ropes that I've actually had for a little bit and never quite did anything with them. So I hope you guys like this idea, and you will see everything in the final reveal, how I used everything and displayed everything. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the ideas from this video so far. And don't forget to leave me a comment down below and give me a thumbs up and share my videos to anyone who you think might enjoy this type of content. So here is the final look, or the finished look, of both of these bowl fillers. I think they came out super cute. Now it's time for the final reveal. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. If you are a current subscriber, thank you so much for coming back each and every time to support my channel. Don't forget to leave me a comment and follow me for more. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in my next one.